Hey folks, welcome into the News 12 Now desk. Thanks for joining us here on this Thursday, April 13th. It's about 11 o'clock here, and we do have some pretty big news we want to bring you following up on what we had talked about yesterday with Senator Ossoff being in town to inspect military housing on Fort Gordon. We're going to bring in our Meredith Anderson again. And Meredith, if you can, just kind of give us an update to this, to what's going to be happening moving forward with this inspection.
Some really big news coming out this morning. Senator Ossoff is holding an oversight session. What he's doing is he's inviting some pretty top officials with the Army, specifically Rachel Jacobson. She is the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment. Wanted to read her title to get that correct. But we brought you information about her early on in this because she was the one who went in front of Congress and said, when she was confirmed into her post, she was confirmed in March 15th of 2022. So this is, in April of 2022 when this hearing happened. She hadn't been in her post that long. So this hearing happened, this investigation happened, where the PSI committee basically saw just terrible housing conditions in Fort Gordon and in military housing across the country. So she goes before a congressional group and says, you know what? We are going to launch our own investigation, the Army is, into housing conditions at Fort Gordon, and we are suspending all bonuses into Balfour Beatty executives at Fort Gordon. So she is a very important piece of this puzzle. So to have her at this hearing, this oversight event, and talk about what has happened since this investigation was released, the results of it, and since this hearing, she is a very big deal to be there. Also, Lieutenant General Kevin Vereen will be there. He is the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army. So this shows you the heavy hitters, so to speak, who are going to be there. But it's not just those two who are going to be meeting with the senator. It is also some Fort Gordon families who are making the trip all the way to Washington, D.C. They're going to be there in the Senate hearing. And what's important about this is that they are going to be sitting in the room with these two top Army leaders and sitting there face to face. And these Army leaders can say, you know what, here's what we have learned in the years since that investigation has happened, the results were released, and that hearing happened, and all of this came to a head. Here's what we've learned. Here's what we've done. Here's what we are doing. And it gives these military families face-to-face time with top Army leaders. That is absolutely important because it's the people who are living in these houses actually have face time with the people who have the power to make the decisions about what's going on at the ground level. So this is super important for the families involved. Also, there's going to be some advocates there as well, some of the military housing advocates. There are so many who unfortunately have had to exist now because of all these housing problems over all the years. But Nick, I got to tell you, when I was reading the list of the people who are expected to be there, there was a very glaring name that was not on that list, and that was Balfour Beatty. Nowhere on here does it say Balfour Beatty has committed to be there, and that is very disappointing to me. We were just talking about this yesterday, that when I interviewed Richard Taylor in 2022 or 2021, he was saying, you know what, transparency. We are going to be transparent. We are going to, put everything out there. We want to help the families. We are on the family side. And then they were reluctant to release. He was specifically reluctant to admit to much of anything when he was under oath, in 2022 at that hearing. And now I'm not seeing his name or anyone from Balfour Beatty on this list of people there. And it's my understanding that they were invited. So maybe that'll change. Maybe Balfour Beatty will be there. But from what I'm seeing now, it doesn't look as though they'll be there. And that's really disappointing to me, especially with their promise of transparency, because I'm just not seeing them deliver on that promise.
Yeah, we talked a lot yesterday about accountability and Balfour Beatty maybe finally taking some accountability in this whole thing that we've been talking about for more than 10 years now. What message does it send to the senator, to the families of these, these people living on post who have to deal with these problems? What message do you think that sends to them that Balfour Beatty's not on that list of people supposed to appear?
Quite frankly, not the right one. I mean, here's the thing, Nick. All of us are rooting for Balfour Beatty. It is all in our best interest for Balfour Beatty to do a great job with the housing on Fort Gordon. It would make no one happier than me and the senator and all these military families for Balfour Beatty to do a wonderful job. But unfortunately, it's not happening from what we're seeing. And I mean, you can't tell them to go. You can't. I mean, they had to be at that hearing in April of last year because when Senator Ossoff was the chair of the PSI, I mean, he had the power of subpoena. They had to be there. They were subpoenaed. They had to testify under oath. This is not one of those types of things. This is not a hearing. It's just a meeting. It's an event to kind of look over how far we've come and what we need to do. So it sends, I mean, not the best message that, you know what, when you have to be there by, I don't know, the law and you show up, well, yeah, you have to be because you're going to be held in contempt of court. But if you don't have to be there and you don't show up, I don't know. I mean, if I were a military family, that would upset me. I'm not a military family member. I don't live in these houses, and I'm upset about it just because I think they owe it to these families to sit in there and say, you know, here's what we've done. And it also, you know, perception is reality, and it appears as though they don't want to face the music, they don't want to face the families, they don't want to face the Army, and quite frankly, I don't even understand it.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost exactly what we talked about yesterday, because we said, you know, they talk about transparency,
right?
Until it's like, oh wait, this could get us in trouble. Maybe we withhold a little bit of this if we don't have to share it. So just for kind of like the nuts and bolts of this whole thing, what is the difference between what we're going to see next week and what you covered last year?
Okay, good question. Senator Ossoff, as chair of the PSI, he is not chair of the PSI for this Congress, but once he assumed that position, he and his colleagues embarked on this 8-month-long investigation, and it was a bipartisan effort. It involved Democrats and Republicans, and they tirelessly looked into housing conditions, not just Fort Gordon, but at other military installations. But Fort Gordon was kind of the poster child for bad military housing. And after this 8-month-long investigation, they held a hearing. So the morning of the hearing, the PSI released the results of this very intensive investigation. And it was really damning, to be honest. And they held the hearing and had some members of the military there to testify, but they also subpoenaed Balfour Beatty, and Balfour Beatty was there to testify under oath, which was important to kind of put them in the hot seat and put them on the spot and answer to some of the questions and concerns that were found during that months-long investigation. So now, fast forward a year later, this oversight meeting is really just a chance for the Army to sit down face to face with the families who live in these houses, who live on post, who live on different military installations, and say, okay, we were listening. We saw what Senator Ossoff and his team uncovered. We heard the testimony. We listened to Captain Cho talk about his daughter whose skin was reptilian in nature from this skin condition that she got allegedly from mold in their house. It was just heartbreaking testimony, which I think we have a little bit of and we'll play later. She kind of is the one who became, for lack of a better word, the face of military housing at Fort Gordon. Just her story so compelling and just so heartbreaking. But this is a chance for the members of the military and the members of these high-ranking officials who ordinarily they probably would never have a chance to be in the same room with or speak with about this sort of thing. And everybody just kind of come together and have a conversation and say, look, here's what we found. Here's what we can do about it. And Senator Jon Ossoff, this is more of him kind of delivering on his promise that, you know, he didn't just find out this stuff and say, oh, this is bad. Here's what's going on. Isn't this terrible? And then, you know, walk away. He is committed to continually making sure that something is being done about it. As, you know, we saw yesterday when he didn't just demand for inspections to happen at Fort Gordon. He was here yesterday sitting with some of the families as those inspections were happening, overseeing some of those inspections. And that is so important because, you know, I think it's easy to hear, oh, well, why hasn't the Army done any inspection before? Or, you know, what do these inspections mean? Well, these inspections mean a lot of data that we have never had. This is a chance for the Army and a chance for these contractors to go in each house and give it a thorough rundown, look at everything, and be able to give us a, you know, are things as bad as they appear to be with some of the anecdotal stories and some of the evidence that we've seen from some of these families. And it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll be fascinating to see what returns of these results are. You know, what are we looking at? Are we looking at mold in, is this an isolated incident, or is this happening in a lot of different houses? And I don't think we've been able to say that. Well, I mean, I know we haven't been able to say that until we take a look at everything. And that's what these inspections are going to do.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so this session is not necessarily about what Senator Ossoff's investigation and these inspections are finding. That is still going to come up later. So this isn't just like, because, you know, these inspections just started a couple of days ago. Because when I first heard it, I was like, oh my goodness, they're already doing what they found in the inspections. They must have found some bad stuff just a couple of days in. But no, this is separate from these inspections that are actively happening right now in Fort Gordon that Senator Ossoff was here for yesterday.
Yes, this hearing happened. I mean, this meeting is almost going to be a year to the day of when that investigation results were released, when that hearing happened in DC. So really it's just a follow-up that's like, hey, we're still on this. We're still paying attention to this. This didn't, you know, this wasn't just a bomb that we dropped, like, look at all this terrible stuff that we found and then that's it. Like, no, we're following up on this. And I'm giving you FaceTime with some very important people in the Army who, you know, are sitting down and going through this with you. And I think that's what's so important, because a lot of times too, and when you are in Washington, say you're, you know, one of these top Army officials, and, you know, you're looking at all these numbers and you're looking at all these statistics and you're looking at, well, this happened at this house and this happened at this house and this happened at this house. This way, they actually get to put a face and a name and a story and get to actually meet the families who are living through some of this. And it really just kind of brings it home. And you know, when you're looking at the sheer totality of the problem, it's not just, as we were mentioning yesterday, it's not just one or two families. I mean, this is not just happening at Fort Gordon. This is happening in installations all over the country. So when you look at the sheer numbers of this, really kind of dialing it down to a couple of families sitting in a room, meeting with these top Army officials, it really kind of brings it back home that, you know, these are families going through this. These aren't, you know, just a document, and these aren't, you know, inspections, and these aren't just pictures of mold in a house. These are real people who are living through these conditions. These are soldiers who have, you know, concerns about their family's health and safety as they're protecting our country. And that's the last stress they need. Their job is stressful enough. So this also kind of, you know, brings it home to the Army too. And I think it's kind of important. So, you know, even with COVID, I've felt it the last couple of days, like the whole disconnect when you're not meeting face to face with someone, it truly matters. And so just being in the same room with somebody face to face, I think it's going to go a really long way.
Yeah, and you talked about the data that we're actually going to get from these inspections. And because right now the data that we have is some cell phone pictures and videos that have been sent to you over the last 10 to 12 years. And so now we're actually going to get kind of concrete data across the board, not just from this house here, that house there. But one thing I wanted to talk about too was yesterday you had mentioned you were impressed by how quickly this had gotten done. The hearing was a year ago. The inspection started happening just 2 days ago, as we know. With this meeting now between the Army and families and up on Capitol Hill, does the timing of that surprise you or impress you? It's been about a year now since that last hearing with Senator Ossoff. What do you make of the timing this time around?
Well, after covering this for so long, I mean, I kind of understand the letdown that the military families have felt, because for so long there have been so many promises like, oh, this is a problem. Oh, you know, we'll do something. Oh, I'll, you know, talk to someone about that. And I feel like there's just been a lot of broken promises, a lot of people who say, hey, I really care. This is awful, because, I mean, who doesn't care that our military families are living in homes that might be unsafe, right? But this, to me, is proof that, you know, these promises aren't empty promises, that somebody really is fighting for them and that they're seeing it through. And, you know, it's hard to get anything done in Washington. So sometimes, you know, it's easy for me to say, oh, somebody promised to do something in the past and, you know, nothing ever happened. I'm not saying that they didn't try, because, I mean, you and I both know, Nick, sometimes there's a lot more red tape and things that we don't understand that goes into things like that. But what I do know is what the military families are telling me and from what I've seen. And that is Senator Ossoff has done more for this in the last 2 years than anyone else I've seen do anything for this in the last decade.
Yeah, and I know you've been in contact with a lot of these families over the years, and especially recently. Have you talked to any, as recently as these inspections started? I mean, how are they feeling about all this with this new announcement?
They're feeling very energized because, it was one of those things where sorry, I've got dogs. This is the whole working from home thing. But they feel, it's just proof that someone is fighting for them, proof that things are happening, that, it's a step forward. I mean, it's one thing like, oh, the inspections are happening. Oh, the inspections are happening in April. Oh, the inspections are happening. Oh, and the senator came down to personally oversee them. So it's just another step forward and more trust that has been eroded for so long is being repaired. As I lose my.
Oh, you good. Do we know what comes next? So obviously we know we've got these 4-ish weeks of inspections. We've got this session happening on Tuesday at 9 a.m., which you'll be there and you will have the latest updates for us there. Do we know what comes after that, when we can expect to hear the results of these inspections, or just kind of the next step in the process, or is it kind of we'll see when we get there?
Well, we'll see when we get there. I mean, we have to remember that they're going to be inspecting every single housing unit. I mean, it's a pretty lofty goal to inspect every single housing unit on every single installation. And Fort Gordon is the very first out of the entire country. So I hate to call us guinea pigs, but we're kind of the guinea pigs here. So we're not sure how long it's going to take. Fort Gordon is going to kind of be the model for how these inspections go at other installations. So we're all kind of learning this as we go. I don't think we're going to know. I don't even know if it's going to take 4 weeks. My guess is it's going to take longer, just because from what families have been telling me for more than 10 years, I think they're going to be there a lot longer than they anticipate. I could be surprised. I could be wrong. It could be faster. I don't know. But I also don't know the extent of the data that they're collecting. I don't know how many pictures they're taking. I don't know how long they're spending in each house. We did ask that yesterday, and the senator's team was unable to answer that. I don't think he knows yet, too. I mean, this is how new it is. I mean, we are the first in the nation for this to happen. So really, it's kind of all eyes on how things are going in Fort Gordon. And today is day 3 of this happening. So all of this is still so new, but Senator Ossoff has been very transparent the whole time, and he has been here. He has personally witnessed some of these. So I feel confident that we will be getting information as soon as we can with this, just because he has been so open in the process and has been very forthcoming with the media. I mean, he's opened his office to this meeting on Tuesday. I'm going to go to that, hopefully if I test negative for COVID, which pretty sure I'm going to at that point. But so I believe that transparency just from Senator Ossoff's office with this, and the Army being there at that meeting, the Army hopefully speaking with us, I'm feeling a shift in transparency, not from Balfour Beatty, but more on the government side. So I think we will have more information with this moving forward. And, I'll keep asking questions. I mean, I'm not going to let this go.
No, of course, and we've seen that over the last 10, 12 years. So why is this so important for the senator? He's been very adamant about this. He's taken a vested interest in this. Why is this so important for him?
Well, because these are men and women protecting our country, and the last thing they need is to have another fight at home. I mean, this is something, though, that, I mean, this goes beyond, and we all as humans should just care about this. First of all, the fact that we're providing housing, and I say we, but we as a government agency, like our taxpayer dollars are providing this housing. It should be safe for these families. It doesn't have to be, they're not asking for the Ritz-Carlton. They just want a safe place to live. The fact that there are homes where these families have provided medical documents that say, this house made me sick and here's how, that my daughter stopped breathing because of mold in my house, and here are the medical records to prove it. That is unacceptable on so many levels. So many levels. So then just take that out of the equation and think of us as Americans, right? We've got these people defending our country. It is in our vested interest to make sure that they are not distracted by something going on at home. And two, we need to make sure that our military stays strong. Our best and brightest, if this is what they have to deal with, do you really think they're going to sign up to be in our military? No, they're going to work for Amazon. They're going to work for Google. They're going to cybersecurity somewhere else. So the human factor, yeah, we should care. And then, of course, for our nation's security, we should care. So this military housing issue doesn't just affect the military families. This is an issue that affects every single person in our country. And this is why we all should care, whether you have a member of the military and military housing or not.
Yeah, and you kind of said it. They're not asking for the Ritz-Carlton. They're just asking for a place that doesn't make their daughter's skin reptilian in nature, as we heard from Captain Cho. And that's a story I wanted to get into a little bit. We do have his full interview from last year that we'll play, but just kind of give us an introduction into who Captain Cho is and a little bit about his story.
He was an officer who lived in the officer housing in Fort Gordon's newest neighborhood. So it was an area that was supposed to be their nicest, the creme de la creme of Fort Gordon's neighborhood, right? So he moves in, and his daughter started getting sick, and he went through all the necessary channels. He went to the doctor. He got doctor's notes. The doctor says they believe the mold exposure was making his daughter sick. He went up the chain of command, and he says no one believed him. So this ended up being a very serious condition, a life-threatening condition, as you will hear in the interview. But he was so upset about all of this that he flew 7,000 miles because he is now stationed overseas. So he flew 7,000 miles to be at this hearing and to testify in Washington last year because he wanted people to hear his story. He wanted people to hear the story of his daughter because he was just so upset about everything that happened. And he really wanted to make sure that her story became known because it's not just her. She represents a lot of other families, some families too afraid to speak up.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, he did speak on at Capitol Hill last year at that hearing, and we do have his interview. We also have the senator's interview from last year. We also have it from this year, so we're going to go ahead and play a whole bunch of sound for you guys right now. But first, Meredith, was there anything else that you wanted to add that we should know about the inspections or this session coming up, anything else that we should know?
Not really, other than we have, of course, a decade of coverage of this, and we have all of it posted to our website. So if you go to WRDW.com, we also on our streaming services on Roku and Amazon Fire, we have all this video. So if you want to watch more, we've got it. You could watch this for quite some time, but we've uploaded it there just to kind of bring you up to speed so you can check out all of our additional coverage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a good conversation about this yesterday too. That's also up there as well. It's also on our YouTube channel. So if you need an easy place to find it, go check out any of those spots for all of our Balfour Beatty and Fort Gordon housing coverage that Meredith has done over the last decade plus. So Meredith, as always, we appreciate you giving us the insight there. Before we go though, how you feeling? How's the COVID treating you?
It's all right. Honestly, my dogs are so happy to have me back. I'm ready to come back, but my dogs are not.
Well, good to hear.
Pretty standard COVID answer, I think.
Yeah, yep. And I remember, back in early COVID when you were working from home, the dogs were thrilled. So I'm sure they're happy to have you back. So
yeah.
Meredith, as always, thank you very much. And we will go ahead and play some of this sound now. And that'll take us right to our midday newscast. So be sure to pop over to the TV side of things once this is over. So Meredith, thank you.
Can you kind of tell me a little bit about what you've seen here today? I know that you've been working on this for a long time, and now you're actually out here today. You've stuck through with the plan to help get these military families some help. And so tell me, during your inspections and you're overseeing all of this, tell me what you've been able to see today.
I returned to Fort Gordon today to ensure that the Army made good on its commitment to inspect every single home on post. That's a commitment that they made to me at my insistence, and it's a commitment that they made to the personnel here at Fort Gordon. As you know, I led an 8-month bipartisan investigation of conditions for military families in privatized housing on post here. And our findings were deeply disturbing. And there's an urgent need for change. And these home-by-home inspections that are happening this week here at Fort Gordon, the first installation in the nation where this is underway, are an important part of the process of making things right.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of what Meredith has uncovered is that the electricity in these homes, they're not rewiring them correctly. The walls are literally crumbling apart. Are you seeing that they're in there, that these inspectors are going through all of that, or what does it look like?
Look, the inspections are underway, and you know, the I team at WRDW has been covering this for years. And so folks in the Augusta area are familiar with some of these recurring issues: mold, structural problems, potential health hazards. The inspections are ongoing. They began yesterday. They'll continue through the rest of this week. My purpose in being here today is to ensure that these home-by-home inspections, which I demanded from the Army, are in fact happening.
Absolutely. And you know, we had talked about this morning, sometimes the government is notoriously slow with some of this stuff, but you've pushed through on this. You know, tell me what it's like to be here today to see this actually come to fruition.
Look, this began with engagements I had with military families here on post a couple of years ago. And I made a commitment to them that I was going to work on this. Led that investigation, demanded that the Army take action. I'm here today to make sure that these home-by-home inspections are underway. So, you know, we're seeing some forward motion. I'm going to keep pushing at it because we've got a long way yet to go.
Are you happy with how fast this has come together?
I am pleased that the Army was so responsive to my urging that these inspections be launched as soon as possible, and that they happen first here at Fort Gordon. So I'm appreciative that Army leadership has done what I asked and what they said they would do. You know, but again, we've got a long way to go yet to make sure that we're doing right by the families who live here.
And these families that you got to meet with this morning, are they still scared? Are they, you know, they're feeling confident that there's going to be change? You know, what are they kind of like today?
I spent about an hour in a town hall meeting with more than 40 enlisted personnel on post here today. And I think this is the fundamental thing, particularly when you've got a young child at home. Environmental hazards, mold, fumes, you know, these become a crisis when you've got a little baby you're taking care of or a young kid. And military families already sacrifice so much for the country. They should not have to sacrifice a safe and healthy home for themselves and their kids. So that's what this is about. That's why I'm remaining focused on it. Again, today, these home-by-home inspections, every single home on post, these inspections are underway. I'm glad the Army has done what I asked and begun that process, but we still have a long way to go.
Do you think Balfour Beatty will keep up clean living for these families even when you're not here? If so, how can you ensure that they're going to stay on track with this and not just kind of let it disintegrate once you're back in Atlanta?
Look, in the hearing that I held in the Senate last year with Balfour Beatty executives present, they made very specific commitments about how they were going to fix things and improve. It is too soon to tell whether or not they are making good on those commitments. I sincerely hope that they do, and I'm going to remain focused on this and hold them accountable to the promises they've made.
And can you tell me how you found these inspectors to do this? Did you bring them in from somewhere? Are they from around the CSRA region?
So I requested that the U.S. Army conduct home-by-home inspections of every single home on post here at Fort Gordon, and that they do it urgently. And they began those inspections this week. I came here personally today to ensure that those inspections are underway, and they are underway.
Absolutely. And then one last one to wrap this
Sure.
up. How long does each inspection at each house last?
It's going to vary depending upon the house, and I can have my team or the Army follow up with you for some more specific data on that.
Perfect. And then the oversights into next week that Meredith mentioned to me about, can you kind of hit on some of those?
Right, because we're open lid on that with RDW,
Yes.
right? Okay. So, and it's Tuesday, yeah? Tuesday morning? Yeah. Tuesday morning, let me give it to you from the top so you have the clip well, all right? Tuesday morning, I will hold in the U.S. Senate an oversight session focused on conditions of housing here at Fort Gordon, following up on the bipartisan investigation that I led last year. Remember that a commitment I've made is to stay focused on this. There are no easy or fast fixes, but I'm going to remain focused on it. So we are holding another event in the U.S. Senate on Tuesday. Senior Army leadership will be there to answer questions about what progress has been made since last year's investigation.
Okay, so that will include this week as well.
So on Tuesday, we will have senior Army leadership in the U.S. Senate for this session that I'll hold to answer my questions about what progress has been made since I unveiled the results of last year's investigation.
Absolutely. And do you plan to return back to Fort Gordon after the 4 weeks is over to kind of get all of the numbers back?
Look, I have been here many times and I will continue to return. And once we have data from this round of inspections, my staff and I will be reviewing that data thoroughly. We will be asking the Army to take action based upon what they find here.
When did you move to Fort Gordon?
My family and I moved to Fort Gordon August of 2019.
And what made you decide to live on post? You said you'd never lived on post before except for when you were living with your parents growing up.
That's correct. So my family and I decided to move on post due to the shortened timeline that we had to prepare ourselves. And we thought that living on post would provide my children the best opportunity to go to school and find a community where there's other children in the same circumstances as them and they can become peers and friends. We thought that would be the best environment for them at the time.
Not to mention it's, what, the world's safest gated community.
I wasn't aware of that, but...
Think about it. I mean, it's a good gated community.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
Well, safe, I guess, can be thought of in different ways. It turned out not to be so safe in your circumstance. When did you first notice problems with your daughter?
I would say approximately a month after we had moved into the home itself.
And what kind of problems did you see?
She started exhibiting itchiness and rashes on the crooks of her arms, as well as her knees, as well as her torso.
And did you think it was just a reaction to playing somewhere, or did you think it was, I don't know, kids can get into lots of things. My daughter, you know, playing in the backyard can get into weeds or something that, you know, makes you itch.
We had heard from others that the environment that Augusta is in is different from other locations throughout the U.S., and we had just came from overseas, so we figured that it was just her getting acclimated to being in Augusta.
What made you change your mind on that one, though?
After her physician, who is an Army doctor at Eisenhower Medical Center, he determined that my daughter had a skin condition that is predicated upon mold. Exposure to mold, mildew, specifically black mold, would cause the symptoms that she exhibited, but she was specifically identified as having severe atopic dermatitis.
And had you ever heard of that before?
No, I've heard of eczema because, you know, babies often exhibit eczema, or young children do, up until a certain age, but not severe atopic dermatitis.
And you said it could be fatal.
Yes, we were notified by her physician that the potential for it to be fatal is there if the conditions were set.
During the hearing today, when you mentioned she wakes up bleeding, that just, I mean, as a mother, that just made my heart drop. How often does that happen, and what is life like when she has some of these flare-ups?
So her skin has become coarse and rough over the period that she was exposed to the mold at the home itself. And unfortunately, it's tried to heal over time, but it doesn't heal properly due to the irritation she still experiences. So there's been times at night, I can't count per se, but I would estimate roughly between 7 to 10 times at least that her skin has broken in the middle of the night because she scratched herself while she sleeps, and then that causes her to bleed, and then she bleeds onto her bed sheets.
So she wakes up bloody?
Yes, that's correct. There's been a couple of times where she has wakened my wife and I and have told us that she's bleeding and that she is very itchy and irritated from her condition.
This has got to be uncomfortable, but not just physically. This has caused some emotional scars.
That is correct. Unfortunately, the emotional aspect is just as profound as the physical aspect. My daughter has sought counseling at her previous school at Augusta, as well as through the chaplain at my former unit, because We had sought garrison resources for counseling, but every single time that we did so, we were unable to reach anyone at all. We kept on getting voicemails or no answers or just dropped calls without reaching a human soul, to which at that point my daughter used an Army resource, a military chaplain who is usually for service members, to receive some type of emotional support outside of the family.
As a father, how hard has this been for you?
I'm incensed every day that I'm reminded of her condition.
You fight for our country, and the sacrifice that you make just by being away from your family. Did you ever imagine your greatest battle would be at home?
I'm of the mindset that the home should be the sanctuary where we can hang up our uniform, we can hang up whatever worries or troubles that we have in the outside society and come home to our home, which provides us a certain level of comfort and expectation. So it disappoints me greatly that that has not been the case with us.
It's bad enough that this happened to your daughter, but then do you feel like no one believed you?
That is quite true. I am thankful that the physicians, both on post and off post, provided extensive medical documentation to establish my daughter's condition, because unfortunately there were certain members of the Fort Gordon community who were not as supportive and who actually said to my face that they either doubted her condition, doubted the extenuating circumstances that led to it, or felt as if we were fabricating her condition to further our own personal cause.
Did the Fort Gordon Garrison commander believe you?
The Fort Gordon Garrison commander, Colonel Pick, did not believe me. I recall a distinct conversation between himself, his command Sergeant Major Brent Smith, as well as the deputy commander, Mr. Hugh Harden, 1 week following my chain of command in Balfour Beatty having a discussion about my family being allowed to move off post. When we had that discussion between the Garrison Command team and I, Colonel Pick, to my face, said to me very clearly and in no uncertain terms that he felt as if either it was not the home that was causing my daughter's condition, which at that point there was extensive documentation both on post and off post to include Augusta University that established that was true, or that something else was taking place and that it was not truly based upon her.
A lot of this discussion today is focused on Balfour Beatty, but does the Army have some responsibility in this too?
I would say it's based upon organization to organization. The Army as a whole is very supportive of their service members. The Army has a model saying people first, which I think is something that we are starting to see come into fruition. However, at least in specific cases such as the Fort Gordon Garrison Command Team, that is not what is taking place, at least for my family. Because I know the Sergeant Major Smith, was notified by the Fort Gordon Housing Manager at the time, Jenna Holman, that my family sought to receive support from the garrison to move in case Balfour was not willing to provide us that option. We were essentially stonewalled for several months between either Ms. Holman not responding to emails or Sergeant Major saying that things were still being discussed, or that he had to brief the colonel himself, or that some other semantic had come into play before either approval or denial was given. And ultimately it led to denial. We were not approved by the garrison to move off post in the aspect that they would fund the move itself.
That's disappointing, because a lot of times, when you talk to the garrison commander will blame Balfour Beatty will blame the garrison commander, so there's a lot of finger pointing. But it appears as though, at least in this situation, there is some blame on both sides.
I would say quite distinctly that there is culpability on both sides. Balfour Beatty, who manages the homes, who provides direct oversight for the homes, both at Fort Gordon as well as the other installations throughout the DoD. In this case, specifically the Fort Gordon Garrison Command Team, those two gentlemen also have culpability in the sense that there was no sense of urgency. There was no sense of, we need to respond to this soldier's request as soon as possible and at least provide some type of options and to have a parlay take place sooner. Because when I contacted the garrison, they were notified in October 2020. I did not get a finalized sit down with the command team until 2021 January, and that was only at the behest of my command team, or my chain of command at the time, who reached out to Colonel Pick and to Sergeant Major Smith and said, this needs to be done as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, your 8-year-old girl is suffering.
That is correct. At that time, I believe she was 9, but she is still suffering. She was suffering then, and she is still suffering to this day.
How do you feel now after testifying and having Senator Ossoff contact you, having your story be part of this 8-month-long investigation? It is a damning report. And having your daughter's photos be in that report as evidence that this has continued.
The narrative that took place today, I hope, resonates with both military families as well as the members of the committee and others who can make executive decisions that can affect change for said military families. If this continues on with just discussions but no action, then these circumstances will play out again in the media, will play out again for families, and there may be other families who will go through something such as what we had to go through, and which is something that is both egregious, but most likely something that will take place unless something is done soon.
What is the difference, though, today? Because there was, in 2019, there were hearings, there was testimony, there was a DOJ investigation where Balfour Beatty pleaded guilty for that 6-year period between 2013 and 2019. Why could today be different? Is this the start of something that maybe could change some things? Do you get that sense?
I am cautiously optimistic that there is some type of change that can be affected now that the narratives between my family, the other families, as well as the very dogged approach that Senator Ossoff has taken in regards to the Fort Gordon housing situation. So we'll see. I really hope that the subcommittee can, again, impact that type of change that others are seeking, because there is no solution for my family. There is no resolution for my family. There is no resolution for my daughter. There is nothing for her. All we can do as a family is to support her as to the best of our ability and to help mitigate her condition, because it is a potentially lifelong condition that she'll suffer. However, given the testimony that took place today, we sincerely hope that there are others out there who see that you do not have to be muted, you do not have to be gagged. There are definitely those who are sympathetic, and if you let your voice be heard, then it will impact those who can make a decision that will impact you again directly.
And you flew how many miles to be here today?
I flew from Camp Humphrey, South Korea.
7,000
7,000 and
miles.
some change, yes.
17 hours on a plane?
About 14 hours, but there were no babies on the plane this time. It was okay.
Why was this so important to you to be here? I mean, that's a lot of effort.
My daughter suffered. The least I can do is at least come out and represent her and have her voice be heard and have her image be shown and have her narrative be understood, so that way, again, the folks here that are present can do something about this, and that those who are responsible are held accountable in the same aspect.
What do you want to say to the other members of the military at Fort Gordon? They'll be hearing your story tonight. They'll be hearing your story some more in the coming days. We'll do some more in-depth reporting because we have a lot of footage to bring back. But they're going to see you bravely talking about this, testifying here. If somebody else is having a problem there, what do they need to do? So many people have felt bullied into silence.
I think for those who know me and who are familiar with me and how I am, they would not be surprised, given my personality and how passionate that my family has been about the circumstances that we've endured. However, for those who are not familiar with who I am, I say that it does not matter what rank you are, what branch that you serve, how long you've served, it's the circumstances. We're talking about support for your family. We're talking about support for you. We're talking about your home. Your home should be your sanctuary. You should not be concerned about your home being a source of detriment to your health or to your family's health. And that rank irrelevant, by all means, speak up to your chain of command. Speak up to the garrison for what it's worth. But by all means, speak up, because if you don't champion yourself, no one else is going to champion you.
Did you see any of our reporting? Just curious if you had watched any of the stories that we had done about the housing at Fort Gordon.
Yes, I am aware of the reporting that had been conducted previously. 2019, before we moved to Fort Gordon, actually I was concerned and I had my doubts about moving on post due to the report that took place prior to us arriving. Because I think this was around, February, March of 2019? and we arrived in August of 2019. So my wife and I actually paused and were concerned, should we move on post? But we were reassured by the Balfour Beatty representatives that your home and the condition that it's in is different from the enlisted home. But again, rank irrelevant. It shouldn't matter if you're an enlisted soldier or you're a commissioned soldier. Your home should be at the standard and quality that is able to fully support your family without any type of repercussions. I was also,
so you brought that up to them. You said, but we saw.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We saw that there was a report done about the homes in Fort Gordon, and they said, oh, it won't be like that?
Correct. I was told that that type of reporting affected the type of change internally within Balfour Beatty, and that going forward there are different business practices that will be implemented to ensure that does not repeat again for the foreseeable future.
Which is basically what we heard again here today.
That is correct. And which is ironic because I think out of all the cases that we've heard, my daughter's is the most severe.
I'm really sorry.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I wish it had stopped when we started it. They told us that in 2011 that it would change. They told us that in 2019 that it would change.
Yeah. Yeah. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, I'm really, for what it's worth, I'm really, really sorry. I know I couldn't stop it, but maybe you can stop it now.
No, I take a sense of comfort in knowing that there are investigative reporters such as yourself who try to seek the heart of the matter, and that you have a very dogged approach, and that you do not relent despite whatever pushback or falsehoods are given to you, and that you can see a lie for a lie, and that if someone's just giving you lip service, that they are. By all means, please continue your efforts, because if you don't, then others will suffer from the lack of someone championing their cause.
Well, thank you. And I hope that this helps. I think it will.
I spoke to my daughter about half an hour before the hearing took place, and I told her, I'm here. I want you to know that this is for you. This is not for me. This is not for anybody in our family, whether this is detrimental to my career or whether this helps my career or whether it doesn't do anything for my career. This is for you, and I want you to know that everyone will know your story, and they'll know what you have suffered and how patient you have been. To which she responded to me, avenge me, Daddy. As I'll do my best. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome.
That's
awesome. So she's walking a little taller,
yeah.
Knowing you're fighting. I mean, that's kind of awesome knowing her soldier dad's fighting for her in Washington.
It's a great feeling, yes.
And is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to say that we didn't get to?
There is a contractor at Fort Gordon who has communicated with my family, very empathetic and very understanding, and has apologized on behalf of everybody, even though that individual has no official stance per se. I really wish I could say the person's name by name on camera, but I can't. But I mean, that individual has been great. They have provided me all the internal regulations that Balfour Beatty has to adhere to, which they clearly haven't. So included in 2012, Balfour Beatty has in their own internal documentation, if there is a complaint regarding mold in a home, that they have to conduct a multitude of tests, not just one, not just two. I believe it's 3 to 5 different type of tests to determine the source root cause of that. And I was also informed that the devices that the Balfour Beatty folks use to test homes for mold and other things are your run-of-the-mill Home Depot off-the-shelf devices that are not properly calibrated, because that individual themselves have worked with these devices to properly calibrate them to ensure the accurate readings are there. So if Balfour Beatty is just nickel and diming their own folks and not conducting proper training and getting the correct equipment and doing the calibrations necessary, how can they say with confidence that they are doing everything they can to support the family members that they are serving? How
did you feel hearing them refute what you said? Like, oh, we don't believe him. There's holes in his story. We don't believe him. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. I believe that they've been well coached. I believe that they believe themselves that they have no culpability, but that's unfortunate because the medical records, my family's experience, everything states to the stark contrast of what they're trying to paint. I mean, you sat here under oath. You've got the records, the documentation. I I mean, I think everyone can decide for themselves.
On post, off post, medical consultation, everything necessary to refute anything that they have to say. Correct.
The BD response, were you surprised by almost defiance, it seemed, even though the evidence was right there?
Look, I think that the evidence of ongoing mistreatment of military families at Fort Gordon and across the country is overwhelming. And this was an 8-month-long investigation that I led. We reviewed tens of thousands of pages of documents. We interviewed dozens of witnesses to find the facts and find the truth. That's what my job has been. We confronted the Balfour executives with those facts, and for them to deny there's a systemic issue is totally unpersuasive. Every day that they don't take this seriously, service members and their families remain at risk.
You had to ask the same question over and over again. Do you feel like you ever truly got an answer?
Well, look, I think that what we did was confront them with hard evidence. The hard evidence is incontrovertible. Again, this was months and months of effort to arrive at the facts. And the facts are that the mistreatment of service members continues. You know, we know that for 6 years, this company was engaged in a scheme to defraud the federal government. They've been convicted of it, and they acknowledge it again today. What I found in the course of this investigation is that the mistreatment of military families continues, and it's totally unacceptable. And this all started because shortly after I was elected, I went out to Fort Gordon and sat down with enlisted personnel and their families, as I do every time I visit a base in our state, and asked them what they needed. And they told me that what they needed was accountability for the mistreatment that they're suffering at the hands of Balfour Beatty. And I told them I was going to take action. And that's why we embarked upon this investigation. That's why we issued this report. And that's why we made sure that those executives were here to answer the tough questions today.
When you started investigating this, were you surprised at what you found?
When I visit with military families across the state, I hear complaints about the state of privatized housing all the time. So I wasn't surprised by our findings. But my job as the leader of this investigative subcommittee is to build a robust body of evidence based upon all of that fact-finding, all of the records that we secured, all of the interviews we conducted, to establish the facts beyond doubt. And we did this in a bipartisan way. You know, I brought together my Democratic colleagues and my Republican colleagues and said, look, the health and safety of military families in Georgia and across the country is not a partisan issue, so let's put aside all of the politics that you hear about in Washington. Let's embark on this investigation together, and then let's bring this company before Congress and hold them accountable.
How does investigative journalism kind of fit into all of this? How much of our reporting did you review and use?
We reviewed the work that you've done over the last decade calling attention to this issue. And I commend you and your team for that investigative work, because you have been shining a spotlight on this at times when it didn't seem like folks at the federal level cared. Your work and the honesty and the emotion with which the military families in the Augusta area asked me to take action are what led us to this moment, where we have now some of the highest profile attention at the federal level shining on this issue. We've established these facts, and that gives us a basis now as Congress to move forward with reform.
What's next?
Well, what's next is to engage with the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, make sure that they see this report, that they understand all of the facts that we've uncovered in the course of this investigation, and figure out whether it's a legislative response, an administrative response, or otherwise. But step one has been finding the facts and getting at the truth, and that's what we've been doing for the last 8 months. Today's hearing was the culmination of that effort.
Just last week, Balfour Beatty was awarded almost $700 million contract at Fort Meade. So even though these problems are still going on, the government is still awarding them contracts, still giving them work.
Well, let me just say right off the bat, I don't think a company that engaged in a 6-year scheme to defraud the federal government, they've been convicted of that, they acknowledge that again today, belongs in a position of trust housing military families. And what my investigation has revealed is that the mistreatment of military families has continued even after their guilty plea. So as far as I'm concerned, this company has lost the trust of the public, and it should have lost the trust of the Department of Defense.
And the same people are at the top. The people who pleaded guilty and the people who suffered under that guilty plea were some of the lower level people. Rick Taylor, who testified here today, testified in 2019 and promised things would change, and he's the one here today promising things are better, and you confronted him with evidence that it's not better. I don't understand why Beatty hasn't made changes at the top too. I mean, you're literally, we're talking to the same person. I don't understand how someone still has a job.
Well, recall some of the specific evidence, right? We uncovered emails from his direct subordinate that reported total chaos at the facilities department at Fort Gordon, which confessed that they were being dishonest with the Army. This is 2 full years after the period of time when they were engaged in a criminal scheme to defraud the government. We found all of that evidence, and we brought that evidence into the public domain today.
And so what now happens to that information is up to the Department of Justice, the legislative body. You're basically just serving it up on a silver platter.
Well, my job has been to find the facts. I lead the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. My job here is to investigate, and we will share this report with my colleagues on the Armed Services Committees. We will share this report with the Department of Defense. We will share this report with the Department of Justice. The next phase is now to determine how we as Congress and other federal agencies take action to stop this once and for all.
What do you want to say to the people of Fort Gordon who are on post when they see this report, that they know that this fight is something that they've been living with for a long time, and they feel like they've been fighting alone, some of them. Now, are you fighting on the front lines with them?
I want to thank the military families who urged me to take this action. I want to thank the military families who have persevered in telling the truth despite their fear of retaliation. I want to thank the military families who were interviewed by my team over these last 8 months as we've conducted this investigation. Without the support and cooperation of the community on post, we could not have done this work.
When will you be back?
Very soon. Be back in the Augusta area very soon. We'll be sure to let you know. And what I want to do next time I'm in town is sit down with some of those same families who now almost a year ago urged me to take this action, share with them the results of our investigation, talk through together how we move forward from here. And let me say this, anybody on post, anybody in the community who's having any problems right now, reach out to me, reach out to my office. We are here to serve you. And we're going to continue to remain fully committed to standing up for military families in Augusta, across the state of Georgia.